Hey guys, welcome back to Build It Yourself. Last video, we finished our custom transmission tunnel in the Continental. So in this video, we're gonna get started on mounting the pedals. We're also going to rebuild our new to us MT-82 transmission and maybe watch this thing. Alright guys, so here's where we're at. We've already removed the crosscar beam, the steering, all that stuff back out of the car because we're going to start mounting the pedals. As you can see, we have chosen to go with the hanging pedal design. We have the floor mounted pedals there, but because of the position of the floor and kind of the constraints within the dash, this is the better choice for us right now. It won't take much work. So it looks like we can mount it directly onto the dash, and we can still use the bracket mounts that come with the Tilton pedals to make something and then mount that directly to the crosscar beam.
We're going to be using the Tilton master cylinders that come for that pedal box, and we got the socket here mocked up with some magnets of where roughly it's going to sit with where it sits on the pedal box. So our biggest constraint is this brake one, the one on the rightmost side, so you can see how close it is to the valve cover there. It's still sufficiently clear, so we think this is going to work. We're going to have 3 master cylinders here, and this really kind of puts it like similar to the OEM position, but obviously on our firewall. So really like how this way would work out. We just got to make sure the shaft fits in between the pedals.
One of the constraints, or one of the things we're trying to do is, as you can see here, we want to make sure that the steering shaft goes in between the brake and the clutch. And in this position, that works out perfectly. You can see the shaft is going to come through. It's going to clear both the bracket, the pedals. And right now, you can kind of see where my foot is. It's a pretty good spot for the pedals. You know, we talked about how they're a little bit high, but we can either add some padding on the floor or maybe lower the pad a little bit. But spacing-wise, it seems like it's a pretty good spot for us. There still leaves enough room for an Excel pedal on the right. So we do have to make some modifications to the crosscar beam in order to fit this way. So let's go take a look at the crosscar beam and see what we got to cut.
We had to cut these off camera to fit this on when we were put this up in the last video. So these were originally what mounted to the firewall. So we got rid of those. We're going to have to make something up for that. But we're interfering with these with the pedals. So we're going to cut these guys out. And I think we're going to have to take a section of this.
Yeah, it's like 6 inches, like from here to here. We got to cut this out because this is where the actual pedals are hanging. So the pedals will essentially fit in this area. And yeah, with taking these 2 out, you know, the next brackets on the crosscar beam are pretty far back. That shouldn't interfere with the brackets. So I think it's going to be pretty simple. We just got to take that out. So we're going to get our angle grinder, cut these 2 off, cut this base off, put this back in the car, and get the pedals mounted. All right, so we got everything bolted up again. We got the steering and the pedals mounted where we had them before, and tight, yeah! It is very tight, but we got plenty of clearance, so enough pedal stroke here. The clutch, we still have to clear out some more on the cross brace, but we got enough room. It's a pretty good position. You know, it clears on the engine side where the master cylinders are mounting. But now I think we're happy enough where everything fits. So we're gonna take everything back out for the 100th time, and we're gonna start drilling holes in the dash so we can mount the pedals and then start figuring out how we're going to mount them, because we got to make some kind of bracket to mount the pedal mounts here to the crosscar beam. So that's going to be the next step. But let's take this stuff out and start drilling on the dash.
Using screwdrivers to transfer the pattern, we made a cardboard template of the master cylinder mounting holes. We doubled, tripled, and quadrupled checked the hole positions before drilling on the firewall, but somehow we still found a way to mess it up.
All right, so we just drilled all our holes in the dash. We decided after test fitting everything back in the car that we wanted to move everything over by about 5 mils. So these are the first holes, and then we just moved everything. We'll plug those maybe, or we might just leave them. We'll see.
Yeah, I like a little water in my cabin.
But we're putting all the studs back on the pedal box. We're gonna test fit the pedal box with the master cylinder for the first time, and hopefully we clear the valve cover. We should clear the valve cover. That's really the tightest condition here. So we haven't been able to use this. We've been using a socket up until this point. So let's see how this fits. We got miles. I can fit 1.5 fingers in between the engine and the master cylinders. We were worried about this clearance. That's why we moved everything over. We're gonna end up now moving everything back. So take everything off and
take the firewall out.
now it's just a matter of making a bracket. All right, guys. So we got the pedal box out of the car. We're gonna start making the.
We got our favorite metal.
Angle iron, Jack's favorite metal for some reason. We started off by pass-McCludding the base of the brackets, then welded some nuts so we could secure it to the pedal bracket and mount it back on the dash. While in position, we welded some rods between the crosscar beam and the pedal brackets so we could take everything out of the car and finish cutting and welding on the workbench. Alright guys, well, now that the pedal box is fully mounted to the crosscar beam, we're going to move on to finishing up a couple of areas in the dash. So we've made up this reinforcement doubler plate that's going to be mounted in between the pedal box and the firewall. So we've made it so that this fits something like that. So we're going to spot weld it to the firewall in a couple areas. It's going to have all these holes for the master cylinders, but this should add quite a bit of stiffness to the dash. And it's going to be tied back to the crosscar beam via the pedal box. So that'll stiffen up that whole area, and that'll pretty much finish it up for the brake pedal. We're going to make sure that the pedals are solidly mounted and we don't get any weird flexes on the dash. So after adding beads for strength and cutting the holes for the master cylinders, we spot welded the plate to the dash. We also made a mounting bracket for the stock Continental Excel pedal, so it would place the pad in the right spot relative to the brake and clutch pedals. We finished off by coating everything with etching primer. Alright guys, well, the pedals are all done. As you can see, Jack made up that bracket we were talking about for the Excel pedal, so now it's mounted in position. Everything feels pretty good. The pedal spacing, the position's good. Right now it feels a little bit too close. My knees are bent quite a bit, but we still have to push the seat back a little bit to fit a little better with the shifter, the steering. So that's exactly where we wanted it to be. We also welded a support bracket here on the trans tunnel. We had cut up some of the reinforcements on the crosscar beam to the tunnel, the original one. So we decided to just mount this, give it a little more support in this area where all the steering loads and stuff goes. So with that, we are done with the dash. I mean, pedals are done, the crosscar beam is done, the trans tunnel is done. So we're kind of done with sheet metal work for a while now. So now we're gonna go ahead and tackle the transmission. We're gonna tear that apart and see all the carnage.
All right, we're gonna start taking apart the MT-82. We've had this in the basement for what, like
A year.
a year,
Yeah,
and
more.
we haven't looked at it, so we don't know if it's good.
This is a very early, like so 2012, 2013 Mustang.
Yeah, it's the AD.
So
It sounds smooth. We just thought we'd check the oil. So
let's see if there's any metal particles in there. That'll be the first sign that this thing has exploded.
it's never, dude, it's
As per usual.
MT-82. You know what 82 stands for, right?
Yeah, 82,000 pieces.
8.2 second quarter mile it withstands.
No, there's no. Oh, actually looks pretty clean.
Of course it looks clean.
That doesn't mean anything, just a magnet in there. Oh, okay, there it is. Oh, that's chunky. All right, so to take apart the MT-82, it's actually relatively straightforward. You don't need any real complicated tools. There's just one custom tool you need.
complicated to me.
So this is just a normal 2-jaw puller. This, I think, is a 6-inch, and I had to make some extended legs. This is just 1/8-inch steel plates to make this long so that it would reach over the back housing, because you essentially have to pull.
Oh, what?
Oh, almost lost it there. You have to pull the back housing off of the front one, and for that you got to use a puller. So we got a bunch of bolts to take out. You have, I don't know how many around here. You got to take out some of these fork retainers, all of these stoppers. All of this stuff comes out with relatively ease. So we're just gonna get started on this, take it all apart, and then we'll show you the carnage.
There's no carnage.
We start off by removing the shift rod detents using a 5/8 wrench and prying them off the housing. Next, we had to remove the seal inside the bell housing to expose the bolt holding the countershaft. We tried getting it out with a self-tapping screw, we tried using a slide hammer, but all we managed to do was carve a bigger hole in the seal.
This Jack started the time lapse because we thought this was gonna take hours. Just grab the wrench in there.
The wrench.
Pops right out. So you're gonna need to pull this out because that bolt is what's holding the shafts in there, and you gotta take the shafts out to look at all the carnage. So
No, there's all the things are fine inside.
I should probably explain why I have little hope this transmission won't have some kind of damage. Some of you may remember about a year ago I showed my MT-82 swapped Lincoln Mark 8 on one of our videos, and while the transmission in it now works fine, that wasn't always the case. I bought a good condition MT-82 for $500 from Facebook Marketplace that would grind horribly every time I shifted into second, and would sometimes pop out of gear under power. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of installing it without inspecting it, so I learned the hard way and had to take it back out of the car to realize how bad it actually was. Not wanting to drop a ton of money on new gears, I turned to Facebook Marketplace again to find the parts transmission. This time, I found a $200 MT-82 that was listed as only needing first gear. So I gambled and took it home, tore it apart, and surprise, surprise, it needed a whole lot more than just first. This thing was completely destroyed. At this point, I decided it wasn't worth the gamble and ordered new gears and parts I needed to take the 2 transmissions I had and make one good one. Now that we're all cut up, let's see if we can go 3 for 3.
Oh, it's bad. No.
It's already broken. Alright, we shouldn't have taken that bolt out.
Don't take the bolt out.
Note to self, don't take this one out. Alright, but good news is all the needle bearings.
Oh, dude, this thing's like brand new.
Yeah, this looks pretty good. This is the truth right. This is nothing though. Like mine was bad. I'll put a picture of how mine looked when I took mine apart. This has obviously metal particles in there, but that's nothing really. So we're gonna clean this
gears.
up. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to see very much from here. We gotta take this out because these little engagement gears are what get ground. So we're gonna take all this apart and put all the gears side by side. See what everything looks like, if we have to replace anything. If not, we'll just put it back together and send it.
Damn straight.
I'm gonna start with pulling reverse out. So this is the fork. So these are the early MT-82s that have this stamped steel forks. I think like, what, 17 or 15 and up have the cast aluminum ones that split in half. So it's a good thing we have these because these are much better. So right off the bat, the famous MT-82 doesn't let us down. You can see here, second gear is completely fucked. All these teeth, right? That's what engages with the sleeve for the synchronizer. You can see all of these are completely stripped. This gear is worse than mine. Mine was destroyed. This thing is in another dimension. Like, I feel like I'm in the Marvel multiverse. Like all these teeth, you can see they're just completely fucked. So what happens is that causes the selector to not engage properly. So it's just gonna pop out of gear every time you try and move somewhere. So we know for sure second gear is gonna have to get replaced. It looks like first gear is okay. Once we take everything out, we'll take a look.
This is part of the gear?
This is the gear.
Those teeth are... Oh,
yeah, that's all. So you gotta replace this whole thing.
For that?
Yep.
I'll just grind it smooth.
No, you can't grind anything.
I'll just grind that smooth.
So, I mean, second, first, reverse, all this stuff is relatively easy to remove because it's like right here. Once you start getting into third, fourth, fifth, those become a lot harder to replace. So hopefully those are okay, but this is not a good start already. Turns out this is not acceptable. This is all second gear.
Yeah, this is not good.
This is all second gear, dude.
We used the 3-jaw puller to remove first, reverse, and the reverse synchro assembly together. Once off the shaft, we could take a closer look at first gear.
First gear now. Okay, this one isn't too bad. You can see, right, so these are the teeth that engage on the synchro sleeve, and these are the ones that usually go bad. You know, I don't know really what is an acceptable wear pattern. Like this, I would probably say it's okay.
Now we can remove the C-clip holding down the first second synchro hub, the synchro sleeve, and the shift fork. Here we can clearly see the damage from second gear. We then unbolted the 3 bolts holding down the plate to the housing, unbolted the countershaft bolt we uncovered earlier, and pulled the shift rod stopper, which allowed us to remove the main shift rod from the plate. And finally, we used the extra long puller to remove the synchro hub from the shaft, which leaves us with a destroyed second gear. We continued disassembling the transmission until we could get the shafts on the workbench so we could inspect third and fourth. Turns out, this thing was worse than we expected.
Ooh, yeah, that one's destroyed. Boy, that is bad.
There's no carnage.
All right, so while we wait for parts to get here, we're gonna start tearing this shaft apart. So this is the shaft that contains third and fourth. We gotta take these out because they're destroyed as per usual. So hopefully it'll go smoothly. We're gonna take this over to the press and try and press them out one by one. We'll probably have to apply a little bit of heat to get them out, but
We have to get to these gears, right? These
Yep.
are the ones we're gonna replace,
yep.
and we gotta take these out.
So let's get over to the press. Pulling these gears out of the shaft was not an easy task. We definitely pushed our 12-ton press to its limits with this job. But with a little bit of heat and a whole lot of pressure, we were able to press them both out and reveal fourth gear. Now we can slide the gears off. This is fourth, so then you have this stuff, which is also, the sleeve is, you can see the teeth that engage on the gear are messed up, so that's getting replaced. And is this heat from what we're putting on, or is that just because they got burned?
You're talking about this?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
synchros.
no.
See it?
Ooh, boy.
It's like really bad heat marks.
Oh yeah, they freaking fried this thing.
To get to third, we just had to press out the synchro hub from the shaft, and third was free to move. For reference, this is what the synchro rings are supposed to look like.
All right, we got the transmission finally all pulled apart, so every piece is out of here and taken off the shafts. We got the main shaft and the counter shaft there. We left the input shaft into here and left the bearings because they're all in good shape, so we're not going to be replacing those. We had to scavenge out of our Diego's mock-up transmission, a couple parts. So let's talk about what we're replacing. We have a couple gears. All the gear faces are actually fine. The problem is with the synchro meshing gears. They kind of wore down probably during shifting. So for example, we have this fourth gear here. You can see how the teeth are there, and here is the new gear. Now, while they sell heavy-duty replacement gears, we opted to go with the Ford gears. We think the problem lies in the synchro assembly.
The synchro assembly is made up of a synchro hub that spins with the shaft, a shift sleeve which is free to slide over the hub, and a synchro ring, also called blocker ring, that sits in between the gears and the sleeve. The purpose of the synchro ring is to get everything lined up and spinning at the same speed to allow for smooth shifts when the shift fork forces the sleeve onto the gear. The synchro rings have a coned inner surface that is coated with a clutch-type material. This surface interfaces with the cone-shaped gear surface as it tries to match the speeds. When you shift, the gear will gradually start spinning with the synchro ring, so the shift sleeve can then slide into its final position, locking the synchro assembly to the selected gear.
We think the problem lies with these stock synchronizers. They're not capable or strong enough to really slow down the rotating assembly when you're banging gears. So we're gonna be replacing these with more aggressive material. We got carbon fiber synchros from Synchrotech transmissions, and these are gonna be replacing these stock parts with these carbon fiber parts. We also got some common upgrades for the MT-82 transmission, like these brass fork pads. These go in each of the fork assemblies, so we'll replace the plastic ones with brass. And we got the seals that need to go to put this thing back together, and the synchro sleeves that also get messed up when those gears go. So all that will be thrown into this new transmission, and she'll be brand new. So we got this is our counter shaft assembly. These are all the gears and components that go into the counter shaft. We got the new third, new fourth, new slip ring, synchronizer ring. So we mentioned before we had to get some parts from the other transmission. This was the part that was really messed up. You can see how dark this thing got. So it got real hot. They were just mashing it and holding it in gear, and these things got black. So these are what it's supposed to look like. You can see the difference. So we got this one out of Diego's transmission, and the carbon synchros are just replacing that center one. So all we did was take out the brass bronze ring, and we're putting in the carbon fiber ring. So that just gets set in here. Those notches line up, and they're all the same. First through fourth all use the same ring, so that makes it easy. Fifth and sixth are a little different. We'll look at those when we get to them, but those go in. So that's the whole assembly for this counter shaft. We got the shaft in the freezer cooling down, and then we're going to heat up these gears because these are a press fit onto the shaft, so it'll help us slide it on easier. And then we put this whole stack together and put it on the shaft. To assemble the counter shaft, we basically reversed all the steps we did earlier to remove the gears. We left the shaft in the freezer overnight to make pressing things on a little easier. We start off by sliding third on and pressing the synchro hub back on, making sure not to forget the C-clip before assembling the rest of the synchro components, and sliding fourth gear on the shaft. The last two gears needed to be pressed, so we threw those in the oven for a few minutes and went to town on the press. This is where our troubles began.
Alright, so we're still having a hard time. Every time we get a little bit of movement on this gear, the whole thing shakes and the synchro assembly falls apart because there's a gap in there. So
And we're pressing upside down.
right, so we're gonna try and do this where we're using 4 zip ties to hold
Zip tie engineering, baby.
That's right, to hold this together.
We're trying to milk this 12-ton jack for
Yeah,
all
this is
she's
definitely,
got.
I mean, it worked for removing it, but we realized this morning that these rods got a little bent. So this is definitely not the right tool for this job, but we're gonna try and milk it. Otherwise we may have to go to Harbor Freight and get a 20-ton press.
Yep. All right, let's get this back in the freezer. 12 tons just isn't cutting it. We probably should have stopped after bending the rods, but like Dr. Tuna Mall says, if you ain't bending, you ain't sending. Off to Harbor Freight for an upgrade. This thing pressed those gears in without heat, without breaking a sweat. So our counter shaft is now fully assembled. This third, fourth gear synchro moves nice. Everything spins good. With the housing all cleaned up, we can start reassembling the transmission. We can throw our carbon synchro rings and 6th gear on the main shaft. These are the synchro rings for 5th and 6th. These look different than the other ones because on the MT-82, 5th and 6th are single cone synchros, 3rd and 4th are dual cone, and 1st and 2nd are triple cone. Here, the whole blocker ring gets swapped with the new one that has the carbon fiber friction material. We put on the synchros for 5th gear, which is still in the housing, then we get to drop the shafts in. The shafts have to be installed together, so we use a couple of zip ties to hold them together while we drop them in.
There it is.
How does she feel?
Feels good, smooth. Alrighty. Now we gotta put the shift, the fork rods, the forks, and we can put the plate back on. Before installing our shift forks, we upgraded these plastic pads with brass. These stock plastic pads are known to fail, so the brass upgrade is worth doing with everything already apart. Then we can slide the forks into the shift sleeves and use the pivot bolts to hold them in position while we install the shift rods. Alright, now that we got the forks and the rods for 5th, 6th, 3rd, and 4th all in there, we're going to close up the bottom half. This just goes right over the shafts and is held by 3 bolts on the housing. So, in there. There she goes.
Several days later.
Alright guys, we got second gear in from Ford finally.
Fuck, man, don't drop it again.
Drop the bearing. You can see the teeth are nice and sharp, brand new. That's what they're supposed to look like, as opposed to that trash we took out from the transmission. You can see.
This time you grabbed the right gear.
Yeah, I grabbed the wrong one earlier. We have to. This is a reshoot. So we have everything laid out. Brand new synchros for 1st, 2nd. Brand new sleeve. These are all the stock gears we took out that are still in good condition. Cleaned them up. We left off with the bottom half of the trans fully assembled. So now we just got to assemble the top end, close it up, and bang some gears.
Baby, let's do it.
At this point, we had installed so many of these that we started knocking these last few gears out without thinking about the proper sequence of installation. Unfortunately, we didn't realize we messed up until we were done pressing all the gears onto the main shaft. Alright, so we actually took the reverse hub back off because it turns out
You're gonna have
this sleeve is only goes in from the bottom, so you actually have to heat it up as an assembly so you can drop it in together, because once that hub is in, that sleeve you can't put on. So we're gonna throw this back in the oven for a couple minutes and get this thing closed up. Speaking of proper installation sequence, turns out the 1st, 2nd fork needs to be installed with the 1st, 2nd sleeve, otherwise the shift rod can't be installed. So we took it all back out, installed the shift fork, and reinstalled all the gears back onto the shaft. At which point we realized this plate needed to be bolted down before installing the 1st, 2nd fork. Everything is back out for a 50th time. We forgot to put this back on. You can't really get to these bolts to secure it down with all the gears on the shaft, so don't forget to put this on. I remember we talked about this too, and we said, I'll put it on after. So put this back on. We have all our shifter assembly, all the forks, all the rods, everything is back on the transmission, ready to go. So we're ready for the final steps.
We did it in the first try too.
Yeah, 5th try. Jack is preparing that counter shaft nut or bolt that we gotta throw in there to hold everything down. He's gonna use as little Loctite as possible because
How much Loctite do you need?
The way Jack is.
How much Loctite?
And we also have our seal here, which we're gonna throw on there. Let's not forget the magnet. And we're ready to throw the back housing, press it back on the transmission, and we'll be done with this rebuild. So let's finish it up.
Look up how much Loctite you're supposed to use.
A lot, dude. Have you
it up.
seen how much Loctite is in like OEM bolts?
Look it up.
Like literally like 5 millimeters of patch.
Look it up.
With the countershaft bolt and sealed installed, all that's left to do is to place the magnet in the housing, lube up the gears, and spread the anaerobic sealer on the mating surfaces of the housing before pressing the backside on.
So a trick to help with this is to pull the pin out a little bit so that way you're not pressing in the pins and that at the same time.
To wrap up this rebuild, we tapped the dowel pins back in, torqued all the back housing bolts and the output flange bolt. Then we can finally tap all the detents back onto the housing. Alright guys, to finish off the transmission, we're gonna coat it with some Port 15, the same color we used for the
It's gonna be
engine
like
block.
one big massive assembly looking thing.
It's gonna look good.
Is
So we cleaned it up last night, we power washed it so it's nice and clean, no more dust. So we're gonna start pouring the Port 15 on there and we'll be done with the tranny.
It looks sexy.
So everyone not in the MT82 gang is asking why we went with this instead of a T56, and the simple answer is these are cheap. So let's take a look at how much we spent to build this T56 beater DIY Stage 2 MT82. The transmission itself cost us $350. So that's probably why it was blown inside, but that's what it is. $350 for this 6-speed shell. Then we got all the gears from Ford, so that was second, third, fourth. So that cost us $213.25. And then we got all the outer shift sleeves aftermarket. We got all the upgrades like the bronze parts, and then of course the carbon fiber rings. All of that totaled out to $621.10. So that means altogether this transmission cost us $1,184.35. So if you know anything about T56s, we probably couldn't even buy the shell of it or the center section of a T56. The hard part about a T56 actually, especially for a Ford, is the bell housing. Those are really expensive aftermarket. Finding a used Cobra, because they only came in a Cobra, is really difficult. So that is a big cost to get a T56 to bolt up with the V10. We could also do a 6060. If we could find one out of a GT500, that would probably be ideal. That would cost some big bucks too. So that's why we went MT82. So I think the moral of the story is if you want a cheap 6-speed, the MT82 is for you, but you gotta be willing to put in the work. So now we got the transmission done, the engine's obviously done. We're gonna throw these two back into the car, and we're gonna be finally working on some sick headers for this thing. Get rid of those cast iron manifolds and get some equal length V10 beautiful headers into this thing. So that's going to be a lot of fun to work on. It's going to take a lot of work. We got a cool tool we're going to get to show you guys and use on that project, so we can't wait to show you. So make sure to look out for the next video, and remember, if you can't buy it, build it. So this is a transmission I picked up probably about 5 years ago. Yeah, probably five. It's been a while. I've had this for a while in my basement. Was gonna use it in something in the future, but I don't know what, and I still don't know what. So it's just been sitting in my basement. I got it from a guy who took this out of a S197 that he was drag racing, and he was swapping to an automatic. So we're gonna take it apart here and prove that you could get a good MT82.
Good used.
Good used MT82.
Used, a cheap used.
Yeah, a good cheap used MT82. How about that?
Which you can.
So.
Yeah, that's anything to say about this, buddy?
The verdict is...
Woo, buddy. That's 444, baby.
I mean, I run this.